Bombshell tonight in the investigation of the death of a young man, Nolan Wells. Death threats are flying. One actually says there's going to be blood. So much blood. Another death threat says, don't go outside. How can anybody do their jobs when they're getting death threats? Not only that, we understand this case. I hope Nolan Wells died by accident. I'm not shutting down our crime stories investigation until I know.
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn.
The threat. You need to hear this threat before anything else. Someone typed these words and sent them to a judge. So much blood everywhere. Yours will come much faster. That's not a movie line. That's a real federal case, filed this year. Here's the first promise. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what's in that threat and who sent it. Here's the second promise. You'll understand why a completed autopsy report is being kept from the public right now. A teenager named Nolan Wells is dead. He disappeared on a boat trip. Weeks later, threats started flying toward the people connected to his case. One threat mentioned a bomb. One mentioned blood. One told law enforcement not to leave their homes. You're probably asking the same question we asked. Why would anyone threaten violence over a paperwork delay? Subscribe right now, because what you're about to learn connects every piece of this. The threats, the silence, the sealed report sitting in a drawer somewhere in Mississippi. Nolan's mother has said one thing since day one. She does not believe her son drowned by accident. She said it before any audio surfaced. She said it before any threats were made. Something about this case never sat right with her, and now an entire online audience agrees. But the real story isn't the threat itself. It's what that threat is protecting. Because somewhere in a state office, there's a finished autopsy report, and someone decided you don't get to read it yet. The threat is what got everyone's attention, but an audio recording is what got this case in front of a grand jury. The audio. Here's Promise 1, delivered in full. An audio engineer named Janetta Brantley pulled a dispatch call off a state agency's own YouTube channel. She wasn't investigating anything. She was working, early in the morning, and she noticed something buried under the static. She dropped the file into her editing software. She split the audio into channels. One channel held the dispatcher. One channel held the callers on the boat. Once she separated them, she could finally hear what was underneath the noise. Brantley said that when she first heard it clearly, her reaction was simple. If this is real, it changes everything. You need to understand this part. Brantley didn't create this audio. She didn't invent a single word. She isolated frequencies that were already there and boosted the volume. That's the entire process. No fabrication, no editing content in, just removing what buried the truth. What she heard stopped her cold.
Hey, jump in and pull the plug while you're going.
Hold on. Take it out of here. Take it out of here.
Hello.
Take it out of here.
Okay, what's going on? What's up? Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership. Hello! Let's go! Hit it hard. Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership. Hello! Let's go!
Nolan Wells could have died the way officials first suggested. Here are 5 facts that don't add up. 1. Nolan was a strong swimmer and an athlete, according to his mother. 2. Hundreds of people were on that island the same day he vanished. 3. Not one person has come forward saying they witnessed anything unusual. 4. He left his phone and his keys behind before he disappeared. 5. One young man present that day, Warren, cooperated with police but reportedly did not take a formal polygraph test. Sit with that for a second. Hundreds of witnesses. 0 eyewitness accounts of what actually happened to him. Trial lawyer Fran Borghardt said if he were prosecuting this case, he'd want to know one thing above all: whether the second autopsy shows real trauma to Nolan's body. Warren spoke to reporters and denied any wrongdoing. He's not charged with any crime. Nobody on that boat has been charged with any crime. That matters, and you should remember it through the rest of this video. But here's what investigators reportedly can't ignore. The independent autopsy, conducted separately from the state's version, noted an unexplained mark on the back of Nolan's head. Blood pooling after death typically spreads evenly across a body. This mark did not. That single detail turns accident into maybe for a lot of people watching this case unfold. Do you think Nolan Wells died by accident? Or do you think something happened on that boat? Type yes if you believe it was an accident. Type no if you don't. You already sense where this is heading, and so does the person who decided to seal an entire autopsy report just weeks before a grand jury convenes. To understand why that report matters this much, you need to understand exactly what's inside it, and why the law lets it stay hidden. What the autopsy might hold. Autopsy reports are public record. That's the law in most states, most of the time. So why can't you read this one? The answer is simpler than you'd think. Prosecutors can request a report stay sealed during an active investigation, especially ahead of a grand jury. That's reportedly what's happening here right now. Here's the detail that should unsettle you. The independent autopsy, performed days after the state's version, found Nolan's body already showing significant decomposition. That raises an uncomfortable question. What condition was his body in before it ever reached that second examiner? Forensics professor and death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan said the delay and decomposition leave the second examiner working without a full picture. No intact organs, no way to fully rule out what happened. If a detail like that unsettles you as much as it unsettled us, hit subscribe now, because we're covering the grand jury decision the moment it becomes public. Then there's toxicology. If Nolan had been drinking, that fact could support an accident. It could also explain why he couldn't defend himself if something else happened to him. The same result, 2 opposite explanations. That's exactly why prosecutors want every answer locked down before anyone sees this report. Whatever conclusion this document reaches, it's now protected under grand jury secrecy. And that secrecy is precisely what someone out there tried to enforce with violence. Should sealed autopsy reports ever be released to the public during an active investigation? Tell us what you think below. The threats, the silence, the sealed report, they're not separate stories anymore. Whatever the truth turns out to be, one person is paying for this silence every single day, and it isn't anyone sitting behind a closed office door. Unresolved close. Right now, other parents are packing their kids up for college, buying dorm supplies, arguing about move-in dates. That's what Nolan's mother should be doing this month. Instead, she's visiting her son's grave. She's fielding death threats aimed at her family. She's waiting on a report she isn't allowed to read. Let's be clear about something important. Nobody on that boat has been charged with a crime. Every person connected to this case deserves the presumption of innocence, and that includes Warren and everyone else who was there that day. But threats aren't evidence. Silence isn't evidence either, and neither one answers the only question that actually matters. What happened to Nolan Wells? The autopsy is finished. The threats are real and federally charged. The grand jury is coming. The only thing still missing from this entire case is the truth itself. Subscribe and turn on notifications right now. The moment that grand jury decision drops, or that autopsy becomes public, We will be the first to break it down for you, line by line. What's your theory? What really happened to Nolan Wells that day? Drop it below. We read every single one,